think everyone is super excited for that. Well, British rider back on the grid, maybe the most successful since Barry Sheene. Watch this space. Talking of riders, though, and one that's keeping very tight-lipped and has been ever since he dropped that bombshell that he is leaving Yamaha, Maverick Viñales. He's been training recently at a training camp out in somewhere sunny. Apparently, all the usual stuff that we've spoken about, Ducati, Aprilia, have all been snooping around. Interesting, though, that he has said everyone has been in contact with him about 2023. So a year out, but no one really wants a year out these days, do they?
No, I mean, you've got Dovizioso syndrome then, haven't you? Andrea has had a year out, and he looks like he's got no way back at the moment, really. I love the Kevin Schwantz comments that were on GP1. You'll have been across those, Peter, I'm sure. Kevin Schwantz saying, leaving Yamaha, he can't work it out for a bike like Aprilia. Poor old Kev, just can't work that one out. It doesn't make any sense to him. Like it doesn't make any sense to me either. You know, you're leaving the best bike on the, you know, it's leading the World Championship. It's there or thereabouts, and he can't seem to get it together in his head or with his team or whatever the problem is to make that work. It's not going to be any different with Aprilia. Just going to have a bike that's less likely to get you to the front, in my opinion, at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, he's keeping tight-lipped, exactly as you say, Harry. I mean, sometimes riders do this because they just want a summer break. You know, this is the other thing. So you get to the end of the summer break and then all the announcements happen because it means that, you know, they don't have to ruin their holidays then by talking about next year. But yeah, it is interesting that, I mean, when he says that everyone's interested for 2023, I'm assuming probably not Yamaha. But but you know, he's right that all of the contracts are up basically at the end of next year. So he has picked a really difficult time to break his contract, if you like, with Yamaha and seek a new team because there's just so few places available. So, you know, he did say a few positive comments about Aprilia, and that still seems the most likely just because what are the alternatives? As Keith said, do you really want to take a year out? I mean, possibly he could do a contract with Aprilia that allows him just a 1-year deal, and then he could have the option of, do I want to stay or do I then want to, you know, go to one of these other teams that he says is interested in him. So that's an option. But honestly, we don't really know what Maverick has in plan yet.
Let me give you some context on that everyone's interested scenario. Everyone is always interested in everyone when you're talking about 2023. You don't burn a bridge managerially, management-wise. You are always making sure that you've got all and everybody, all and sundry, all on side, ready to go. There's no way that you rule anything out at this point in a contractual negotiation. So, yeah, everyone's interested. I'm interested in running a team with Maverick Viñales in it.
I think we get a few sponsors on board, and I think that's got legs, Keith. I would be very excited to see that happen. But of course, actually, just sort of last. Go on, Keith.
Well, I mean, it's the point. The point was actually flippantly made, but it's a serious point in that, you know, management are always making sure they've got everybody nailed down as far as they're all talking to everybody at this stage. Nothing is ruled out. So yeah, Maverick may have had contact with everybody regarding sort of 2023, but believe me, it's going to rely as much on 2022 as anything else. It's going to be one of them situations where he is going to have to pull his socks up and do the business, or he's going to be in trouble. You know, it's Dovizioso is one of the best riders. You know, you can go back to the likes of Randy Mamola, one of the best riders to find himself without a job at the end of the day. I mean, Dovizioso, I mean, you would sign him, you know, but all of a sudden he's been sort of left to one side, and he's the guy everyone's using to back up their arguments in a management type team type shuffle. You know, well, there's Dovizioso on the sidelines. You know, it just keeps the price down for everyone else.
Well, last one on this. A reshuffle at Ducati, could that then see him have a home? Because we know that Viñales was...
Well, he got enough bikes.
Well, exactly. And we know he was negotiating with them before he re-signed with Yamaha. So the only option right now as it stands would be VR46. But with a reshuffle, something could be potentially there at Ducati. And that would seem more logical than Aprilia.
I don't know. Maverick Viñales defies logic.
Yeah,
you know, it's a situation where there's something not quite right in the way that he approaches what he's doing. To finish last on an M1 factory Yamaha you would say is almost impossible. Most of those guys in the top line could ride that thing round with one end, to last place. It's just shocking, and I don't understand it. I'm not close enough to be able to make an educated, comment on why that is the case. But other than a completely flat tyre or something, I mean, how can he be at the back of a field on an M1 Yamaha? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why is he considering Aprilia? I mean, Aleix Espargaro, he has a one-lap wonder in it now and again, and he's sort of an 8th place, 7th place sort of runner. It's going to be interesting. The bike hasn't done the business yet. Dovi hasn't jumped at that bike. Dovi has not, taken a pay cut and decided he's going to race the Aprilia. There's a reason for that somewhere. At the end of the day, Dovizioso was first in line for running an Aprilia, testing an Aprilia, but he's not put pen to paper. So he's obviously not convinced that the Aprilia is the bike for the top man. So I don't know. I think Maverick's making a big mistake. It would be the best thing if he can absolutely, make me crawl back under me stone when it comes to that opinion. But I've seen a lot of it, and I just don't think that's the right move for him. Ducati, would you want to make that mistake with Ducati? Would you? I mean, he's got huge talent, Maverick Viñales, but would you want a guy that's head fries every now and again? Would you want that in your team?
Well, that's the question.
I guess it depends which team. Yeah, as you were saying, Keith, there's a lot of Ducatis there, isn't there? But the trouble is, yes, the Ducati riders are contracted, most of them, to the factory. So in theory, moving people around would be easier. But, VR46, you've got to imagine it'll be an Italian rider, probably a VR46 rider that they will want in their MotoGP team. Well, the only Ducati guy that fits that bill is Bagnaia. And I mean, how do you convince him to leave the factory Ducati team? I mean, you can't see that happening. So, I think it's very difficult. I think Ducati would be interested, just from the point of view, as you say, Harry, that they were willing to make Maverick their number one guy only 18 months ago, and now maybe they have the chance to have that guy for a fraction of the price on one of their 8 bikes somewhere. The trouble is, it's just come a bit late, isn't it? We've seen that most of the lineups are done now, and it's not like putting him at Pramac or something. I mean, that's normally where Ducati sort of put the riders that they think are great, but they're not too sure. They don't want to take the risk and put them in the factory team yet. So they let them prove themselves, and we're seeing, with Zarco this year, it's working out well, that sort of thing. But those Pramac seats are full at the moment, so yeah, it's going to be. It's just, as we're saying, there's just not spaces available. It's a really bad time to be looking for a ride.
Yeah, well, Maverick Viñales leaving us with more questions than answers for the last few weeks, and we'll continue to do so, I'm sure, for a few more weeks going forward. Now, we've talked about a little bit with the Formula One at Silverstone that happened just this weekend gone, as we record this on a Monday, and we saw that they trialled out a new sprint format, which was essentially a sprint qualifying race. They qualify on Friday night for the sprint, then Saturday afternoon they race it out for about half an hour, and the results of that sprint set the grid for the Grand Prix on Sunday. Why do I talk about four wheels on this podcast? Well, the question is, should MotoGP start to look at maybe something similar, or just start to ponder a race weekend format change? Keith, we spoke so much to you about your life and career in the last show, discussing the differences between what it was like in your era and modern day MotoGP. Would you like to see a bit of a format change? And what would you want to put in if there was something you could add?
I naturally quite like the idea of having a race on a Saturday. I hate the fact that it's qualifying for grid positions. Formula One got themselves in a right old mess with that, didn't they? It's not a race. Commentators were told it's not a race. What is it then? It's a race for qualifying. They couldn't quite work out exactly what it was. What it was a sprint race, short sprint race, run any tyres you like, go as fast as you can, which I quite like the format of. Yeah. But of course, there's a bit more to it than that. You've got to qualify for the sprint race, and then the sprint race then qualifies you for the main race on the Sunday. They didn't want to, and I think that MotoGP will be aware of the same kind of situation, in that you don't want to pull down the quality, not the quality. What's the word I'm looking for, Pete? You'll know it because you're a man of words. But they don't want to make it. Well, yeah, I think the significance. The main race is the main race. So by diluting that main race into a Saturday, I mean, we've got the format in World Superbikes. You know, we've got that situation where they race on a Saturday as well, and in British Superbikes we've got the same situation. Do we want 2 races, one of less significance than the other, during the course of a weekend? My natural feeling is no. But we live in a democracy when it comes to the fan base, and at the end of the day, what do the fans want? That's the big issue. It is about what the promoters and what the manufacturers can manage, of course, because if you're going to increase mileage and so on and so forth, then you're going to need probably a few more motors on the allocation for the year and so on. And bearing in mind too that qualifying is a major, free practice is not really free practice anymore at a MotoGP, Moto3, Moto2 situation. Free practice is qualifying for qualifying. You've got to do a good free practice to get yourself in the right qualifying session, to then enable you to get yourself towards the front 4 rows of the grid after qualifying too. So it's already a very busy weekend regarding data. You only have to have a slight weather change in there as well during the course of the first 2 days, and it really does put everybody on the back foot. So I'm not keen, but I can understand why fans might say, "Oh, yeah, that's great." I mean, who wouldn't want more races? It's a bit like saying, well, the riders and teams are all saying, well, we only want 20 races in a year because it's bloody hard work travelling from country to country, and all the teams are at bursting point by the time we get to the Southeast Asian scenario. But the fans would all turn around and say, let's have 28 rounds. It's great. Yeah. Television companies, 28 rounds, fine. That gets us nicely into where we want to be with that as well. It's a hard one, isn't it? But I would say that we are where we are. I like the format we've got at the moment. A sprint race would be a bit of a novelty, but it's up to the fans at the end of the day. And I dare say they're going to be pretty much involved in this, as Dorna are quite... well, they like interacting with fans. They keep an eye on their fan base. They are involved in that. And they're leaders compared with Formula One when it comes to social media and stuff like that as well. Adorna have been very, very good when it comes to picking up on the social media, the importance of social media and the importance of their fan base. Whereas Formula One, in the hands of Bernie, of course, wasn't. It's a marked difference now that we've moved on with your latest lot. Was it Liberty that have got the ownership of it all? Can I waffle on any longer? No, no sprint race.
No,
that's the answer.
Well, it's interesting. From my understanding, is with the F1, they're obviously trialling out a few races just to see what it's like. There's no confirmed plans for it yet, but in my opinion, it was there to try and invigorate what was happening during the Sunday Grand Prix, to try and add in a few more variables to make the racing on Sunday more exciting. Compare that with MotoGP. I don't necessarily think there is no problem there with MotoGP at the moment in terms of Sunday races. And in fact, what I saw with the F1 is it more reinvigorated Friday practice more than anything. That suddenly became, or the day on Friday, that suddenly became more enthralling and interesting. Whereas, as you say, Keith, actually right now MotoGP's already got that in place. Friday practice is already quite crucial for the qualifying. So at the moment, the only thing I would drop in that might spice things up, and this would be very controversial, I would like both your opinions on it. What do you think of reverse grids?
Oh, go away. Shut the front door.
I'd like to see
behave yourself.
Yeah. I'd like to see what Lequona could do from the front. No?
Now that comes into the domain of novelty.
Yes.
I'm afraid that this is a serious sport.
Yeah.
And putting all the efforts and all the millions that are spent on the back row of the grid to get tangled up with everyone else. I mean, to start with, you've got a situation where the amount of things that can happen during the course of a race. I mean, the reason there's such a scratch and a scramble to get to the front of qualifying is because you don't want to get tangled up in someone else's first corner problem. And that will happen, and that will mess the championship about, and so on and so forth. But reverse grids, no, we're not going banger racing. Let's have a figure of 8, shall we, somewhere as well.
Hey, well, go on, Pete. What are your opinions on this?
Well, I think, I mean, I don't like reverse grids. I think there's two sides to this. I mean, we did used to hear there's too much testing, not enough race weekends. So then we saw the testings drop for the race weekends. I think you could make an argument now. There's too much practice time relative to the 45-minute race. You know, you 4 free practice sessions. I know they're not as simple as he says. They're more like qualifying sessions, but still 4 free practice sessions, 2 qualifying sessions, 1 warm-up, and then 1 45-minute race. Now, you know, so I think everything should be looked at. I think one of the great things about the F1 weekend, I don't watch many F1 races, but it was great to see how many fans were there, because let's be honest, everything has changed during this pandemic. You know, people's lives have changed, their interests have changed, their viewing habits. It was great to see that actually people still want to come back to a racetrack, you know, and watch an event. Now, we don't know how it might be, you know, at races where, let's say, there's a much bigger proportion of foreign visitors that come in. And we were just talking about the tourism industry and things like that. You know, a lot of countries use the races to try and bring people into the country. Well, that's a lot more difficult now. Is that going to have a bigger impact on, you know, how much money they're willing to spend on hosting races? But anyway, that's a slightly different issue. But it was great to see that at Silverstone, where there's obviously a big fan base at home in the UK, they can still come to the races. So we can expect, hopefully, it'll be the same for Silverstone MotoGP, which is sort of equally as popular, really. Now, I think sprint races, the trouble is, as Keith says, you don't want to overshadow the main race. And so what do you do? And then you have the problem of if you win a sprint race, can you say you're a Grand Prix winner when you haven't won a main race? So, you know, for me, divide the grid in half and maybe do like half of by World Championship order, 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, you know, and you do a race. But what does it count for? Does it count for qualifying? As Keith says, it's a bit messy when you have a race to count for qualifying. But I mean, we've been talking about, for example, Moto2 and Moto3, all these problems with towing and all this. Why not experiment in those classes? Make them do a sprint race. You know, divide the class in 2, so there's no conflict with. No one's going to claim, well, I'm the best guy on the day, because, well, you only raced half the grid. But you know, it might be a way of getting rid of all of that. Instead of doing, you know, we keep talking about super pole and separating people. Just make them do a race. You know, who knows? I think everything should be looked at, because we've seen Moto2. It's a one-engine class. You know, people. Oh, you can never do that in Grand Prix. You know, you can't have everyone using the same engine. We've seen back-to-back races, you know, because of the COVID pandemic. Again, people would have said, oh, no, you can't do that. So I think everything should be on the table. And I think potentially, you know, I know Lewis Hamilton said something about 2-day weekends, didn't he? That maybe he thought they didn't need to be, you know, 3 days. The trouble is that then people that go to the races, they get less value for money, don't they? If it's only, you know, things like that. So it's not as simple as that. But I understand the trouble when you have loads of practices that a bit like you're saying with reversing the order or things, you arrange people by the fastest guy at the front, and then you have a race and say, why don't they overtake? Well, you know, yeah. You spent 5 hours getting the top guy to start at the front of the grid.
That's in Formula 1, not in MotoGP.
No. Well, yeah.
Fair point.
I mean, you had the Jonathan Rea rule, didn't you, for a while at World Superbikes, where they mucked about with the front 2 rows of the grid and tried to put Jonathan Rea back a row or 2, which didn't work at all, because by the end of lap 1 he was always in front anyway. So all I think that did was really honed Jonathan Rea's 1 lap determination, which was always a bit of a spectacle. I don't know. I think that the point you make there, Pete, is actually quite valid, in that you know, the teams that are at the front are the best ones, and they're the fastest guys that will start from the front. So it is I can understand that they're putting them back a little bit, but it's been tried before, and I think it just makes a mess of the championship at the end of the day. The fast guys are the fast guys. MotoGP is within a second. The whole grid is within a second after qualifying, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 riders, but generally it's all within a second. I mean, when it's that tight, starting to put people at the back and making them force their way through, we end up with while we're on the car analogies, the Hamilton-Verstappen situation, don't we? Someone trying to ram it underneath someone else in an inappropriate place, perhaps, and you end up with what happened there. You know, a major title contender has been bashed out of the. Well, he's still got a 7-point lead in it, so Hamilton's got more work to do yet. But the point still is valid in that, you know, you might lose your championship leader trying to make his way through the slightly slower riders in MotoGP. Nah, leave that bit as it is. No reverse grid.
No reverse grids.
No reverse grids. Stupid suggestion.
We can agree on that.
All right then. So
I quite like figure 8 still, though.
Figure of 8. I don't know. I've got Joker lap, haven't you? Like in rallying as well. Right, we've got lots of you who have got in touch, which is really lovely to see, and I thought I'd open up with a few more listener questions.